Speakcies.
Hello and welcome to Origin of Speakcies. This is season 5, episode 123. We've got a fun one today. Steve's finna do some new slang for us today. We're going to be talking about swords and dragons, not maybe always literal, but we're going to talk about the Sword of Damocles, which
yes,
I is interesting and one that I've never quite known if I was saying it right. So we're going to clear that up completely. And then swords. Dragons. So
you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're gonna have a piece of pie, you got to have a scoop of ice cream with it. If you're gonna have dragons, I think swords need to be involved.
Absolutely. You can't do one without the other. And I have always been a guy who was into fantasy literature. And it's always seemed a little weird when I say that, because just the word fantasy, it could be misconstrued. And it didn't help. I was thinking about this right before we started recording, which is some of the covers to these fantasy books do look like romance novels. Like I got called out in high school. One of my teachers was like, it was a Stephen Lawhead book and it had a guy on the front, shirtless with like long flowing hair, but he's got the big sword in his hand. And she's like, "You're reading romance novels?" And so of course, being in like 10th grade or whatever, I ripped the cover off. So I've still got the book somewhere, but it just doesn't have the cover. It's super homoerotic though. No, it's not really. It's great. Actually, I haven't reread it in a while, but anyway, I've always been into fantasy. The reason I bring that up is The Wheel of Time is my all-time favorite book series. And if you want to know more about my obsession with Wheel of Time, we talk about it in episode 113 when we had Kitty Rollo on talking about the pronunciations of the names, which, by the way, so The Wheel of Time is this fantasy series. It's 15 books long. The author, Robert Jordan, took like years between each book. So it's sort of like a bunch of people really just grew up with these books. And Amazon is putting out a show, which is coming out in about a month from when this releases. But what's funny is we've got to talk to Kitty again. Because they have announced how some of the names are going to be pronounced on the show. And they've changed it. They've changed some of them. So that may not seem like a big deal to some people, but
it's a big deal to our friend Kitty. And I want to make sure now also that they have Amazon has access to a rocket ship, that they're not going to take people that disagree with them and they're magically, Kitty Rollo, you've won a free ride to outer space. Just
that's right.
Be careful, especially in a rocket that looks like that too.
Yeah, exactly. It would look like a dragon leaving the atmosphere, I guess. But so anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on Wheel of Time, but when it comes to dragons, the dragon in the Wheel of Time is not an actual dragon. So as much as I love Game of Thrones and their dragons, I've never been a big dragon guy. So the Dragon Reborn is the one who's prophesied over or that he's going to come and yada, yada. Watch the show. It's really good.
Yeah.
But Steve, what about you? Ever been, I don't remember you being a fantasy guy or a sword and dragon type guy.
I think that's an accurate way to describe me. I was never a fantasy guy. I also too had just problems with that title. I don't know what you would rename the genre, but fantasy it sounds silly. And if that makes any sense, I know that's probably a better word for it. And dragons, that was always kind of like a thing for me. Like most books, I think Narnia would be the exception. I can't remember. They have dragons in Narnia books?
I don't believe so, unless it was one of the later ones. But
so maybe I was really consistent with that. But looking at me, I'm sure you're thinking, he's probably too busy playing quarterback in high school. But my nerd genre is Star Wars,
right?
Which I've kept, I think, in balance. I think the depth of my fandom would be to make sure I always like when a Star Wars movie comes out to see it the night it comes out, to be like one of the first people to see it. But I don't do it in any sort of costume. I think really the only time I put on costumes is I'm kind of like a cicada. Except every several years, I dress up like Prince and go
Yeah,
out in public. So it's a different type of
that's true.
occasion.
You see Steve with the Prince outfit, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, has it been 13 years or
Yeah.
whatever it is?" Yeah, I would say I think that you and I are both. I mean, you're really into Star Wars. I'm into this, but I haven't had like a movie. I mean, when Game of Thrones came out, because of course I read all
Mhm.
those as well. I was against it at first, but I started realizing too with Wheel of Time, like even if the show sucks, and that's the big fear. It's like you get this
Yeah.
chance and then it sucks. I'm like, you know what? Who cares? The books are always there. Even if it sucks, even if it's good, it's not going to be the same as the books.
Right.
Um,
And that's the fun of being a fan is no matter
yeah,
what happens, you can find something to criticize and be self-righteous about.
and I will, because even with Game of Thrones, I was always that guy that was like, well, they didn't do this in the books and
Yeah.
whatever. Um, but I don't think until recently, until this show came out, that you'd sit there and say, "Oh yeah, Scott's a big like he's a Renaissance fair guy, or like he's really into dragons and stuff."
Yeah.
I had this situation. It's you sort of alluded to it where you said, "I'm into Star Wars, but I'm not like." You had made it clear that's like I don't dress
Yeah.
up every time, but I do go see the movies. Like you keep it to
There's a
where it
line.
doesn't define you in your life. My cousin, so I remember this story from when I was a kid,
Mhm.
and I know I'd read The Hobbit and maybe a couple other things. I've seen Puff the Magic Dragon. I didn't have a lot
Yeah.
of exposure to dragons. And my cousin, who's a year younger than me, Eric, he asked me, I'll never forget, we were at my grandparents' house. He's like, "Are you into dragons?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, dragons are cool. And his response was like very intense. I live for dragons. And I
Hmm.
remember my dad was there and we kind of gave a quick look at each other like,
Yeah.
all right, this guy really likes dragons. And it was in that moment that I said, I'm going to be okay. Like that, he's going to be the dragon guy. And
Yeah.
I'll be okay as not being that insanely into dragons.
You don't wanna have a family with multiple dragon guys. That can make summer vacations or Thanksgiving kinda awkward, I would think.
That is very true. Um, One other thing I hate about dragons, since we're doing a dragon episode, I'm gonna say all the things I don't like.
Yeah.
I really don't. Have you ever seen that bumper sticker? Do you ever have things that just drive you nuts and you're not really sure why? Oh, wait, who am I talking to?
Yeah. Not me, that's definitely not me.
I feel like mine are a little more bizarre. Yours, like you really don't like when people talk on speakerphone in public, um, a bevy of vegetables, animals, but you have a sort of ethos, I think, against the stuff you don't like. I
Yeah.
randomly don't like certain bumper stickers. Have you ever seen the one that says, "Do not meddle in the affairs of dragons, for you are crispy and good with ketchup"?
I have seen that, and generally everyone I've seen driving that car looks like they've had a lot of ketchup and a lot of other food along with that ketchup, if you know what I mean.
I think I catch your drift, which by the way, I heard somebody said that the other day. They're like, "If you catch my drift." And I'm like, has anyone ever like needed that? Like, have you ever not caught the drift until
Right.
somebody said, "If you catch my drift"? But anyway, just a random thought I had.
No.
I hate that bumper sticker. I see it,
Mhm.
it just pisses me off, and I don't know why. But like I said, we're not going to be talking about a specific dragon. We're going to be talking about chasing the dragon. And what does it mean? I have
Mhm.
heard this one a lot recently. And to me, it just means it's always just meant like trying to recreate a great feeling that you had in the past once, but it's kind of elusive. You can't get that great feeling. From Wikipedia, chasing the dragon refers to the elusive pursuit of a high equal to the user's first use of a drug, which after acclimation is no longer achievable.
Hmm.
So, since I don't think either of us are into hardcore drugs.
Not yet, but as of now. We don't know when this will air. It's gonna air a few weeks out, but as
Yeah,
of
well,
now, no.
as of now, we're neither of us are into that, but I thought we could go over a couple maybe examples of times in our lives where something happened and we're still chasing that dragon.
Mhm.
Um, I can start. So I'll say that for me, there there was a moment in circa what 2004, whenever MySpace was out.
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever recreated the thrill of that first little message you got that said like somebody's commented on your on your
Right.
board. So I didn't have Friendster, so MySpace was sort of like the first social network thing I had ever
Mhm.
done, and it was just like, whoa, somebody messaged on my page like, what is this? Is so cool. They're gonna go on my top 6 or whatever. And then you just got addicted to like seeing, oh, somebody sent you a message,
Yep.
somebody posted on your thing. Now obviously that's all we do now is look
Yeah.
for that stuff, but it'll never be as good as that first MySpace comment I got.
Mhm.
So I'm still chasing that dragon.
And I think we all still are. You and I have had discussions offline about taking social media apps off our phone that we feel
Right.
like they're necessary to have because you keep going back for it and you don't find it.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, I had taken it off my phone, Instagram, and it was fine, but I was struggling a little bit. And then I put it back on either yesterday or the day before, and it's been like, you know how like they say like an alcoholic, they can not drink for a while, but then they have that
Right.
one drink and it's like a binge. I
Yeah.
pretty much had on Instagram. I'm like, oh, I gotta post. I gotta post. How many people have looked at my story? You know what's going on? But so I think we're all sort of a lot of us are chasing that dragon. What
Yeah.
about you? Do you have any non-hardcore drug related
Right.
things?
I would say as someone who's older, some people would say I'm in my very late 30s. Some people would say that he actually is my 40s. But as I've gotten older, um, canceling plans or canceling meetings
Yeah.
is a rush that is I haven't done a lot of hardcore drugs or really any, but I imagine what it's like when you finally you get that Friday night back after the plans have been canceled or that
Mhm.
Saturday afternoon back. Oh, it's something. Or canceling that meeting that late day meeting and it goes away.
Oh my gosh.
It's something.
It's the best. It's the best. Matter of fact, I just remember I had that happen today.
Mm.
I didn't do the canceling, which
Mhm.
I'll let you think about this. Which is more, which is a bigger rush, when you cancel a meeting or when somebody else does? Because I woke up this morning. I was off work yesterday, and I logged on at like 7 something, and I had a meeting scheduled for 10 that wasn't there when I had gone on my 3-day weekend.
Mhm.
And I just was like, "Oh, here we go. I gotta prep for this now." And then and then like 30 minutes later, I got moved to a week later. And I mean, I think I just out loud was like, "Yes." I mean, I was
Yeah.
so what, I don't know.
Yeah.
That might even be better, having someone cancel the meeting or
So
reschedule it.
I don't like we don't like to discuss our professional lives too much on here, but about 90% of what I do is schedule meetings. So I have to be careful. I can't let that become a drug addiction of canceling meetings because I wouldn't be very effective in my job. So I'd have to say I'm kind of obligated to say I like it when other people cancel
Yeah.
meetings, but at the same time, the good thing that comes with that is you are also relieved of the responsibility of being the one to cancel the plan. So you don't look like the jerk who's always
Right.
like, Steve scheduled another time to come over to our house, and
Right.
then he canceled on us again. Even
Right.
though I don't think that conversation ever happens. I think people are probably relieved, and maybe why I'm on the receiving end a lot of things being canceled. But
Right.
it's just good all around. I mean, it's kind
Yeah.
of like pizza. Even when it's bad, it's pizza. Canceled plans,
Ooh,
canceled meetings. It's good stuff.
that's right. So yes, that is true. You are a planner, and you can't get high on your own supply, as they
Yeah.
say. So
Yep.
that makes sense. Um, I love to make plans. Like, I'm a guy, especially I'm the guy that if I've had a couple drinks, I make all the plans in the world.
Mhm.
And then it's a matter of I got to like slowly start canceling these plans. But yeah, when somebody else does it, it's pretty
Yeah.
great. So anyway, chasing the dragon, I've always just thought of as this thing where it won't ever be as good as the first time. I
Mhm.
didn't know that there was actually a little more to it.
Mm.
Before we get into the definition, there was one other thing I was thinking of this morning, and I'm going to put you on the spot because I
Okay.
know you'll know this. I think you will, which is I have this vague memory. So the last thing I associate with dragon is bad
Mhm.
breath, because I
Okay.
remember something about people, probably like you and some
Mhm.
other people that were older than me, running around, getting in people's faces, similar to like giving people the gas face, which we've
Yeah.
already covered with MC Search, was you've got the dragon. Did I make
Mhm.
that up or hallucinate that? Or is there
No,
some rap song that's in?
that actually did happen. That was first of all, it came from a song from the late Biz Markie, rest in
Oh,
peace, called "The Dragon," um, which was used to describe different odors that a person could have. be it
Oh,
underarm or breath. And it was used one time, but one of our good friends, and I will say his full name because we also discussed him with MC Search, our
yeah.
good friend Jeff Forbes,
Yeah, that's who I was
that,
thinking of. Yeah.
that he told a school administrator whose name I will leave off, but was so corrupt that this individual was actually run out of Africa. I remember finding that newspaper, which was but Jeff Forbes,
That's
he
right.
told her that. And by the way, Jeff Forbes has an enormous penis, which we shared with MC Search also. So just when I get a chance to talk about
Yes.
Jeff Forbes' penis, there we go.
Yes, that's so true. All of that's true. So okay, well, let's talk about chasing the dragon.
Sure.
And now I think everyone, by the way, kids listening, you should bring back the dragon for meaning
Yeah.
bad breath because that's pretty good. Say you got the dragon.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
I'm
hope kids
gonna.
are listening to this segment, especially now that I've besmirched it.
They've heard the word. They've heard the word dragon
They
before.
know about Jeff's penis.
They
I
know
think
about Jeff's
everybody did.
penis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's
out
out
there.
there.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to read a surprisingly thoughtful definition of chasing the dragon in Urban Dictionary.
Whoa.
It blew me away because Urban Dictionary, again, you have to pull it up. Even
Yeah.
if you think, man, I've got what I need on this one, you're just shooting yourself in the butt if you don't pull up Urban Dictionary. And usually it's just something funny and there's some good examples. Here we go. Now you're going to have to let me this is going to take a minute, but it's worth it, I think.
All right.
So from Urban Dictionary, the number one result, chasing the dragon. This term is a bit more complicated than merely smoking opium. It starts when you have your first high. The world is peaceful. Everything is perfect. You're numb, but in the best way possible. But soon it starts wearing off fast. Your mind races. You're pulled out of your dream world. You crave the drug more and more, wanting to feel the same way as you did in your first high. You go to the dealer and buy the same amount you had the first time and smoke. Still feels good, but not as good as the first time. You go and buy more. Closer, but not quite there. You're stuck. You don't know what to do. You want to go back to that little dream world and stay forever, but your body's already developing a tolerance. You panic. You use all your money to buy more and more and more, but still not the same as that first time. You realize that you have no more money. So you start selling your things, pawning whatever you can get your hands on for the next bag. Still, nothing compared to what you had on that first magical time. So you're broke and own nothing. But you don't care. All you care about is getting back to the first high. You start stealing, doing, quote, favors, whatever gets you the money for the attempt. Your life becomes a living hell, all in search of a repeat of the first high. That's chasing the dragon. So we are going to get into another definition of chasing the dragon right after this.
Prison slang with Mindy the Dog. Hey guy, my name is Mindy the Dog. Here's some things to know about me. I am a beagle. I spent time at a dog rescue run at a prison. I ain't going back to prison. I look good. A few years ago, I was rescued by my best friend. My best friend is clearly the alpha of her pack. Like me, she looks good. Life with my best friend is good. I get to hang out in the yard, or sometimes the deck. I like to take a walk, or not take a walk. And I like to have my time to relax. But my favorite thing is food. I like food even more than my best friend. That's where my best friend's beta comes in. She calls him Steve. I call him the honky man. I often wish he would go away so I could have my best friend and all the food to myself. As a dog, I think about food often, as does the honky man, which is why he is so fat. So here's some prison slang about food in prison, courtesy of prison-diaries.com. Papa, Spanish for potato. It's a prison snack made from combining crushed potato chips, squeezed cheese, and hot water to make a paste that is then spread out like a soft shell. This one makes me think of the honky man because he is soft, weak, It looks like squeezed cheese. Fatter girl cake. Prison dessert made by smashing up all cake-like items from the commissary and putting them together in a bowl and binding them with non-dairy creamer, marshmallow fluff, and pieces of candy. This is one of my favorite treats. And no, it was not named after the honky man. That beard ain't fooling anyone, fat guy. Finally, Dobie. A biscuit or roll derived from the word adobe, which means brick. This is not a type of food that I like, but it definitely makes me think of the honky man. I wish he would get hit in the head with a brick and die. Hey guy, thank you for listening to Prison Slang. If you want to learn more about me and how good I look, you can find me on Instagram at @TheRealMindy the Dog. Watch, like, and subscribe to Origin of Speakcies at YouTube. If you like this segment, want to support Origin of Speakcies, go to patreon.com/Speakcies. That's patreon.com/Speakcies. I'm Mindy the Dog, and hey, that's my fatter girl cake honky man.
So we talked about the figurative way that chasing the dragon gets used, and shockingly, an eloquent post on Urban Dictionary. Sounds like somebody that had some experience with chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
But why is it called chasing the dragon? Why a dragon? Here's more of the definition. This is from Wikipedia. It says, chasing the dragon is a slang phrase of Cantonese origin from Hong Kong, referring to inhaling the vapor from a heated solution of morphine, heroin, oxycodone, opium, or yaba, which is, a pill containing caffeine and meth. So the chasing occurs as the user gingerly keeps the liquid moving in order to keep it from overheating and burning up too quickly on a heat-conducting material such as aluminum foil. By the way, I kind of don't like the fact that I'm like giving but it's exactly how you chase the dragon, but it's for
you're also
educational
not making it. It's not like a really good commercial for it either.
And we're going to talk about, that's going to come up too.
Yeah.
Yes. So what happens is the moving smoke is coming up off of the conductor, so let's just say aluminum foil, and the smoke is chased with a tube through which the user inhales. This is called foilie in Australia. Otherwise, chasing the dragon is what it's called everywhere else. So I didn't know this. I'd never, again, having not been a user or doing this, I just thought chasing the dragon was a metaphor. I really had no idea that there was a thing that looks kind of like you're doing something like that. You're sucking out of a straw trying to get these plumes of smoke. So that's actually where it comes from. There's an article in the Herald Express in Devon, England in 1960 that says, drinking straw holders are disappearing from some small cafes and restaurants in Hong Kong, and proprietors are issuing one straw with each drink. One explanation is that too many straws have been taken in the past by customers who wanted them for tubes to, quote, chase the dragon. There are a number of articles starting around this time. Really, I think the first one was in 1954 that talk about this chasing the dragon and warning of it, essentially, like, and it's coming from China. It's coming from communist China, which anyway, we'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
So I'm just out of curiosity. Did you know that was what chasing the dragon was? There was an actual thing that
I thought it always referred to using some sort of opiate and then trying to get back to that initial high or rush. I didn't know it actually involved chasing something, and I could see that almost being a game you could play too under the influence of stuff like that. It kind of gives you something to focus on as you're doing that, and that becoming part of the ritual too of you associate this high with this thing, and it's probably never as good as it is the first time.
Definitely. Yeah. So according to worldhistories.net, you start seeing these articles in 1950 describing the act of chasing the dragon pretty consistently. again, this coming from Hong Kong, opium was being shipped out of communist China to the rest of the world. And guess what? That's still happening with fentanyl.
Yeah.
So, look into that. We won't go into that, but
Yeah.
um,
Something bad was released from China and ended up
yeah,
in the United States.
yeah, I know.
And by the way, I can say that as a Belgian Mongolian. So everyone put
Yeah,
your jitters down.
thank goodness. Steve has that. He's grandfathered in.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, China, I'll have a positive thing to say about China before we end this. But yeah, between drugs and COVID, um, yeah, they should probably start. And by the way, concentration camps. Anyway, I would highly suggest you listen to Barry Weiss's podcast, period, because she covers so much of this stuff
Yep.
about what's going on in China. And the fentanyl thing is scary because guess what? Nobody's dying of fentanyl in China. You know that, right? Because guess what? You can't take fentanyl. You can't do it. If you do, you're going to be prosecuted. I mean,
Right.
they are locked down. So they're making this stuff and they're shipping it overseas and everything is getting laced with it. Because the best thing you could say, the most generous thing you could say is that they just don't care
Yeah.
who else gets hurt. The probably more true thing is they know exactly what they're doing. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to. Dang it, I said I was going to keep this light, but the fentanyl thing.
You're doing a pretty good job. We did talk about Jeff Warp's penis. So
That's true. Thank you. Bring it back. So the phrase originated, it's a translation of a Cantonese slang, chui lung, meaning dragon chasing. So it literally comes from a Cantonese dragon chasing, started in the 1950s in East Asia, and in connection with the systematic production and distribution of narcotic drugs, organized as a government monopoly by the Chinese People's Republic. From the National Library of Medicine, I want to talk about heroin a little bit, since really this is about heroin.
Let's keep it light.
We're going to keep it light. So first, heroin smoking originated in Shanghai in the 1920s, involved porcelain bowls and bamboo tubes, thereafter spreading across much of Eastern Asia and to the United States over the next decade. Chasing the dragon, that terminology, was a later refinement of the form of heroin smoking, which came out around the 1950s, as we've established. After the 50s, chasing the dragon, this method of smoking these drugs spread to other parts of Southeast Asia in the 60s and 70s, and then to Europe in the 70s and 80s, and much of the Indian subcontinent during the 80s. So it started in China and then moved from there. So heroin, I have to mention this because it's a cautionary tale, and it's also interesting. And we talked about this with Micah a little bit when we did No Free Lunches, but I'll bring it back, which is, as you know, because we've talked about that, heroin was created by the Bayer Company. They started production in 1898. So they formulated heroin on a commercial scale. And I mean, it was called heroin because it was coined from the German word heroisch, meaning heroic or strong. Or I know I said that word wrong in German, but I can barely say English words, right? Heroin is stronger and more potent than morphine, and it was thought of as a wonder drug. So heroin really came from that same root word as being a hero or heroic. That's how great they thought this thing was, which I guess you can understand if it feels that great to take, and all of a sudden, you're able to deal with other pain and maladies. You would think, hey, this is a wonder drug. Unfortunately, by the 1910s, the medical community and just the community at large started realizing, we got a problem. People are becoming dependent, and this whole chasing the dragon idea of not the actual getting it with a straw, but the not being able to recreate the high because your body's acclimated, it became apparent. So by 1924, it was made an illegal drug by the federal government. And it's just, I want to talk about this a little bit because it's so crazy to think that we kind of brought this one upon ourselves, and we're still dealing with it today. The fact that when I first started researching this, I looked up, I just do what I always do. chasing the dragon. Let's just see
Yeah.
what first things that come up are, so I don't miss anything big. And I clicked on the first couple uh, links, and they were both documents to, it was FBI.gov, and it went to big PDFs that was literally called Chasing the Dragon, the Life of an Opiate Addict. So here we are in 2021,
Mhm.
and heroin is such a big problem, and it didn't really have to be. We created it thinking it was going to be helpful. Not that there aren't, morphine was still around, was already around, but, and it kind of makes me think about COVID too, which is, again, uh, not going to go down too far down the rabbit hole, but potentially was created by the gain of what is it called? The gain of function research. And now
Mhm.
it's just here with us forever. Heroin's here with us forever. We got to deal with it. And same with something like COVID. It's like, these things that happen, and they don't
Mhm.
always, they start with maybe good intentions, and then we just have to roll with it.
You
So,
mentioned doing this to ourselves, and what's funny is we did it to ourselves again. I had the opportunity a couple years ago to read the book Dope Sick,
mm,
about the opioid crisis in the United States, and it started a lot just like what you were discussing with Bear. New opioid-based medicine came out. It really helped people in chronic pain,
mhm.
get over it, and it was a Pandora's box of things that once it got out of hand. And just, to read I highly recommend the book. And I believe they're also making a TV series on it that was filmed partially in Richmond with Rosario Dawson and Michael Keaton.
Oh, cool.
And if you get a chance, it's not a happy read, but it gives
Yeah.
good insight on to how this happened and just how insidious it is. And
Mhm,
in the same way, with it maybe starting with good intentions, it's a
mhm.
odd combination of good intentions gone wrong, a drug that can't be controlled, and just greed on behalf of
Yeah.
lots of people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm interested in that. I have heard good things about that book, probably from you. But yeah, I really didn't want to make this be sort of one of these things where I'm old man yelling at the cloud about anything. But I will say this about heroin. There's the whole fight against drugs,
Mhm.
or war against drugs, I should say. They, the media, normally I'm sitting here complaining, but just
Yes.
like movies and TV and stuff, they did a really good job of making heroin look like, make me never want to try it,
Yeah.
because it's just made so clear that, like, look at every person that's been, I'm thinking about like Bubbles from The Wire, right? Or like,
Mhm.
and then also the fact that like half of my favorite singers of rock bands all died from it,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, guess it's awesome, but like, I don't, let's put it this way. I can't think of a single person who had, like, you hear this with marijuana all the time, where people are like, oh,
Yeah.
it helps me. I like it. It's fine. I live a functional life and I use this drug, or, whatever. You
Mhm.
don't ever hear anyone like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm a heroin guy,
Yeah.
like, that you're like, oh, really? Is that like the key to your success? Is that how you have this big house? Oh,
I
you
was
just don't
really
have
dealing with
examples.
anxiety and life was getting me down, and then I found heroin and everything changed for the better.
Yeah. Every story I've heard about heroin, the words rock bottom are used in it. So I'm going to wrap this part up, and I'm just going to say, you know, don't do drugs. And I'm going to say something positive about China, which is, and I was talking crap about dragons and dragon
Mhm.
bumper stickers, but the dragon in Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings, that Marvel movie, is cool. And that movie is cool. So as you know, I spend all of my dorky energy on Wheel of Time and Game of Thrones and stuff like that. So I'm not a big Marvel guy, but it's a great movie. And I don't think it's a spoiler alert to say, the mythical Chinese dragon, like you've seen obviously before, is so cool in this movie. So
Mhm.
dragons can be cool. All right,
Dragons can be cool.
dragons can be cool. Steve, you got a new slang for us today?
I do, but before I get into that, you had said you were worried about sounding like an old man
Yeah.
screaming. Well, I'll one up you in that. So recently, I was at a store with my daughter. I think it was actually at Cabela's, the hunting supply store, because obviously you look at me and you're like, that's a man who's camping and hunting all the time.
Sure.
But we're there in line, and my daughter sees a candy, and the candy at Cabela's, like in the waiting in line, is not your typical supermarket candies. There was a
Mm,
lot of brands, I didn't recognize it, or if I did, they kind of put up memories of just older times. And there was one candy whose name escapes me, that my daughter saw, and she was initially excited, and then she was disappointed. I'm like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "Well, there's only 2 flavors." I'm like, "What flavors are there?" "There's cinnamon and butterscotch."
Mm.
And it really hit me that there was a time that butterscotch was around everywhere. Butterscotch was a flavor that was an
Mhm.
option, and whatever happened to butterscotch?
I have no idea, and you're so right about that. When we were kids, butterscotch was everywhere. It was, you the hard candy. You had
Mhm.
is Werther's Originals butterscotch?
I
Maybe.
think that's caramel, but it might
Yeah,
be
I don't think that's
butterscotch.
butterscotch. You're right. Yeah, I think butterscotch is already starting to sort of disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened? Like, what? And isn't butterscotch just? No, I'm thinking caramel again. I was gonna say it's just basically sugar and butter.
Well,
Yeah,
it
I
it
don't
made
know.
me think, like, how do you describe the taste of butterscotch to someone who hasn't had it?
Yeah.
And I really have no idea. It it's not really buttery, but maybe it is. I mean, it's I would say it's like in the caramel family.
Yeah, I can if I think about it, I remember what it tastes like, but it's been so
Right.
long. I think I'll tell you what happened was bit like no, and this is not even trying to make a joke about that. I
Yeah.
think it's because palates obviously have changed over the years. If you
Mhm.
look now at what kids want to eat when it comes to candy, it's like what's the sourest possible thing to just blast my taste buds, right?
Right.
Same with okay, everything is now like flaming hot
Mhm.
Cheetos, flaming hot
Yeah.
chips, flaming hot and I told my kids, I'm like, "Y'all gotta stop eating this stuff because you have no palate. You're blasting away all of your taste buds by the time you're, 10." So I guess butterscotch is maybe too subtle.
I could
Um,
see that because it
on
sounds like
yeah.
something that could be made practically. Like, you would have
Mm,
leftover butter and leftover burned sugar, and you would somehow whip that into something,
right.
and then whoever made it for you would die at the age of 31.
Yeah, it's yeah, because it's like if you watch some old show, like if you watch a Little House
Yeah.
and the stuff they get excited about, or like I remember Anne of Green Gables, one
Mhm.
of the all-time greats, when Matthew goes down to the store and Anne was like, could you get some brown sugar? Like they're just
Yeah.
the idea of having like brown sugar in the house
Mhm.
is a treat. Nowadays, I bring home brown sugar as a treat. My
Yeah.
kids would
I have
would
a
riot.
pocket full of it right now as we're speaking.
So yeah, and on the same note as butterscotch, so we had gone to my kids and I had gone to Busch Gardens, and
Mhm.
on the way out they have the candy shop, and I'd felt pretty good because I hadn't spent much money at I kind of planned things out well. I was like
Yeah.
feeling generous. Hey kids, want to get a little bag of candy on the way out? Sure. So we go in, and they just didn't have as big of a selection, and somehow my daughter had ended up getting a little bag, and she got like 2 or 3 of those little hard strawberry candies. They're, like, wrapped into strawberry, like, cellophane or whatever,
Yes.
and I
I
told her, I was like, I wouldn't get too excited about those." And sure enough, she started the first one and, like, spit it out in disgust, like, "What is this?" It's like, "This is what we used to like, this was candy." Old
Yep.
people in the neighborhood, I had an old lady when I was a little kid in Ohio, you go to her house and she'd give you probably a butterscotch and maybe, like,
Yeah.
one of those hard strawberry candies, and you were like, "Whoa, this is candy. This is awesome." Now, no.
I think the problem is it wasn't properly, housed. A candy like that needs to reside in the bottom of an old lady's purse next to her cigarettes for at
Yes.
least 15 years before it's ingested. It needs to be like a
Yes.
fine wine before it's time. You don't wanna spoil
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I wonder when we finally break our 40s and get
Yeah.
into old age one day, is the a flip gonna switch and we're gonna all of a sudden like, what's gonna happen is it's gonna be like that, what was that movie, with, oh gosh, the diabetes guy, Cocoon. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, we're gonna figure out, like, the secret to being old and eternal life is just butterscotch, like, hard
Yeah.
candy. All of a sudden, it's gonna be like, "Here's where all the hard candy's being kept," and it'll just be the greatest thing we've ever had, and we'll get a few extra years on our life. Or are we gonna be old going, "I need my Sour Patch Kids."
Yeah. Kids these days have never had flaming hot Cheeto Sour Patch Kids,
Not
and
yet.
if they only knew what they had missed out on. Time for some new slang right after this. So, Scott, a lot of podcasts talk about Manscaped.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that? So I have
Yeah,
nothing
it's every
against
podcast. Yeah,
every
definitely.
podcast does. And I've really nothing against Manscaped except they don't give me any money. So I don't feel very loyal to them. But I will tell you something that I'm loyal about. Conair clippers. So Scott,
Ah,
when you were growing up, were you guys a sponge family or a washcloth family?
dude, I was just a raw bar of soap, but if I had to use something, it'd be a washcloth.
Okay, and I think that's good. I've evolved into a raw bar of soap person, which I don't understand why anyone really isn't.
Yeah.
We'd have friends that were washcloth
Mhm.
families, like you'd visit, and it was always weird. Like, well, I guess I don't know,
Get it a little
slather,
wet and just kind of.
rub soap. I wasn't sure what to do. And maybe it's some sort of disease I picked up because we were a sponge family. And I think I've alluded to this before that we were one of those families that we had one sponge and everyone used it for everything. And saying that out loud
Wow.
now, it's kind of gross sounding, but I tell you, you know what? It's helped inspire me with my Conair clippers. So I use and my family we use Conair clippers for everything. If there's hair in our house getting cut, Conair clippers are doing it. If it's my back, if it's a little trim around my ears or my neck, I mentioned my back. You know, I like to have my wife shear me like a sheep twice a year. And if
Mm,
you're wondering, does that really make her excited? You bet.
you
And
betcha.
she's even almost as excited as she is to have me discuss it here as I promote Conair clippers. So what I like about it is I use it everything and I use it everywhere. And in case if you're wondering if I use it everywhere, if I mean my genitals, I do. So one of the things that's great about Conair clippers too, they're very durable. I have never oiled or maintenance these at all, and I've had them for about 10 years. And I tell you, it helps when you're doing some shaving, maybe some more sensitive areas,
Mm.
because it puts a little bit of thrill in you. You're a little scared, and it actually helps with parts of your body retracting into itself as you see the rust and sometimes the sparks as you approach very sensitive areas of your body. So
Mhm.
Manscaped, again, have nothing against them other than the fact that they don't support Speaksie. So Scott, do you mind sharing on screen that link I sent you? So
Yeah.
I don't know how much Manscaped costs, but right now on Amazon, you can get an 18-piece hair clipper set for $20.15. That's pretty great. And look at all those options you get with that. And I tell
Yeah.
you, you can do everything with it. You can cut hair off every part of your body for just $20. That's a pretty good bargain, wouldn't you say? So
I
when
guarantee you that's Manscaped's gonna be a little bit more than that.
yeah, I tell you, it's a bargain. And I tell you also, can they last for 10 years? And sit there rusty and probably needed to be oiled, yet I'm still gonna shave parts of my body. And maybe if anyone that comes over to my house, like if I get trim up their kid's hair and not tell them what else we've done with those clippers, they get the job done. Conair custom clippers, the preferred clippers of Steve at Speaksies. Go to Amazon.com, look up Conair custom clippers. Check out the link on our bio on our social media. You'll have a link for you today.
New slang when you notice the stripes.
So last season for New Slang, I worked pretty hard on the Reader's Digest and did what I could to kind of wring out some hip new slang because when I think cutting edge humor and what's going on in society, 2 words, Reader's Digest. But I wanted to be diverse in my resources, hashtag diversity. So I had been using parentology.com. But I didn't want to get in a situation where I was just really drinking from that well too much. So you know me, I'm an innovator. I got to stay on the edge, even though I'm longing for someone to give me butterscotch pudding. But I still wanted to,
Ooh.
expand my boundaries. So I'm using a new website today, motherlovedchaos.com.
Mother loved chaos.
Lovin', no
Mother loving
G.
chaos. This one actually does sound cutting edge, more
It,
so than even Reader's Digest.
oh, even more than you imagine. So this is the welcome that you get when you go to that website. Welcome to Mother Loving Chaos. If you're a single mom with neurodiverse kids, then girl, you're in the right place.
You had me at single mom, but then you lost me quickly.
Yeah. I'm not sure what any of those words mean when they're all put together like that, but I'm going to stick with this anyway. Hashtag diversity. And an article on motherlovingchaos.com called 98 Slang Teen Words Every Mom Should Know in 2020 to 2021.
Okay,
It's
good.
a very thorough article. They're like,
Yeah.
we're going to document a 2-year period very specifically. So the term I'm going to explore today is finna.
Ooh, is this a cousin of Finsta? No, it probably has nothing to do with Finsta, but we did that. You did that one before too.
I did do that one. I am hip and on the edge, as evidenced by my source for today, Mother Loving Chaos, quoting from them. Finna replaces about to or going to. Like, I'm finna steal one of his chicken tenders if he don't hurry up. Please note that I was quoting as if instead of he doesn't hurry up, he don't hurry up.
Yeah.
So we're off to a good start here, I'd say. And what's the best way to keep a hot start going? Urban Dictionary.
Yes.
So go into Urban Dictionary. Abbreviation of fixing to normally means going to. And to be perfectly clear, I'm going to quote from Timmy T from what he posted on June 9th, 2003. I'm finna go da stow.
Okay, so you're going to go to the store.
I'm fixing to the store. I'm going to the store.
Okay.
So Urban Dictionary, thank you.
Thank you,
always.
Urban Dictionary.
So not a very full explanation, but I found one on dictionary.com that was very full. And I'm going to share it with you now. So from dictionary.com, an article, what does finna mean? Finna, a contraction of fixing to, means getting ready to do something. It is used to express a goal to take some sort of action in the near future. Finna, sometimes pronounced or spelled as finta or fitna, is a shortening of the expression fixing to, like gonna is a shortening of going to. Finna emerged from fixing to in African American English and is recorded in hip-hop lyrics in the late 1980s. For example, NWA's 1987 Three the Hard Way features the line, I finna kick this shit, all right? And King T's 1998 Act a Fool includes, I'm finna act a fool. So as much as it doesn't look like it, you and I are fairly knowledgeable on hip hop and especially golden age era things like when NWA would have been out. Fairly familiar with NWA, not familiar with that song. King T, I vaguely remember, but that also sounds like a fake, just a standard. If I was making up a hip hop name, I could do that. So I guess that's where it started. I haven't found any better resources, but I'm not done.
Good.
I'm still here at dictionary.com.
Okay.
Although finna and gonna are similar in meaning, they have subtle differences. Finna can sometimes be more immediate and, unlike gonna, can't be used to indicate something in the distant future. Instead, finna refers only to the intent that's going to happen in the near future. The meaning is a little bit more similar to bouta, similarly contracted from about to. So before you turn my camera off and read a couple examples, and we are a PG-13 podcast, which means I can talk about how large Jeff Forbes' penis is.
Yes.
But there's certain profanity I shouldn't say, so I'm going to censor myself. The effing grind really finna go crazy. And that's a quote from Fenty on Twitter from 2019. That demonstration is of something that's going to happen very soon. Maybe a positive. But finna can also be negative. So you can say, I'm not finna fight with you. So one last thing from dictionary.com is a very nice way to finish this off by being lectured, which is always good. It's nice nowadays. You can go somewhere and be lectured. You can be lectured pretty much everywhere. Anytime you encounter any media, there's a lection there for you. So it ends a little tisk-tisking. Be mindful that finna is a valid feature of African American English and is not grammatically incorrect. Also be aware that finna, while widespread in popular hip-hop culture since the 90s, can come across as patronizing, insensitive, or appropriative when used by people who are not part of African American speech communities.
Good.
I hope you feel scolded. So to end on a positive note, the real origin here is finna is derived from fixin' to, which I think is a very Southern phrase. I don't know if I've said it, but I've heard people. It's pretty common to hear someone, I'm fixing to do this or that. So from an article from entitled 11 Southern Phrases and Their Strange Origins from AL.com, they address fixin' to. This phrase dates to the 14th century when fix meant to set one's eye or mind to do something. The meaning of getting ready to do something is American in origin and was first recorded in the 18th century. The Oxford English Dictionary cites the 1716 example, he fixes for another expedition. So,
okay. That's good to know.
Yeah, kind of. So, we always like to give a thumbs up or thumbs down on the new slang we do. I'm going to give this a hard thumbs down. I don't like it anyway. It abbreviates something that really doesn't need to be abbreviated. The fact that I think also what really spoiled it for me was after the horrible stereotypical examples that dictionary.com gave us of how to use this term, it ends by wagging its finger at us, the reader.
Yeah.
To make sure we don't appropriate culture after they quote somebody named King Quissy to give an example of how to use this word.
There's nothing like, there's nothing like being scolded to not. It's almost like saying, "Hey, don't eat all that old butterscotch." Like I wasn't going to. I don't want to use it. So thank you. You gave me a good. I don't want to appropriate anything. I hate this one so much. I've been squirming over here, just waiting for you to ask me if I liked it or not.
Yeah.
And if Ziggy, my dog, had thumbs, I'd bring him in here and ask him to use his thumbs so I could give it 4 thumbs down. I hate this with the fire of 10,000 suns. It's the worst. If you say finna around me, I'll confront you. That's how much I don't like it.
If you say fin in front of me, I will slap you in the mouth. An open-handed slap. And this has been New Slang.
Oh, okay. We're gonna move on from that was the worst.
I need to get in case anyone wasn't clear. I hate that one. Probably more than anyone I would if Chief Keef was here, I'd be happy to see him. Compared to that was awful.
And it's insulting. They're like, it's, by the way, gang, don't cultural appropriate this one. I'm like, look, there's some stuff I want to cultural appropriate, like tacos and the golden age of rap.
Yeah.
Finna ain't on that list.
Yeah.
I'm finna.
Yeah. And after they just posted a whole article on it.
Yeah.
Jessica or Melinda or whoever it was.
Her name, whoever wrote it, it's got to be Jessica. It's follow back up on who that was.
Yeah.
Let's talk about fun things.
Yeah.
Swords.
Yes. Swords.
So we said before, if there's going to be a dragon, there's got to be a sword.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the Sword of Damocles.
All right.
Now, bringing it back to Wheel of Time.
Mm-hmm.
There is a sword in the Wheel of Time, very important. It's called Callandor, and it's a Sa and Griel, and it's made of crystal. And here's what's cool about it. It's bound by weaves of spirit, and it can only be taken out by the Dragon Reborn. And it's very similar to, does that remind you of anything else? Only one person can pull this sword out.
Yeah. Medea goes to jail.
Yes. Medea goes to jail, and Arthurian legend, of course. The Sword and the Stone, which was always my favorite. I loved that cartoon back in the day, and I've always loved Arthurian legend and read a lot about that. One of the cool things the Wheel of Time does is it taps into all sorts of references, and Arthurian legend just being one of them. But personally, I've never been a sword guy. So going back to like I was talking about how when somebody gets too into something and then you're just like, well, that's not for me. Like when you're younger, because you can only associate it with that one thing. I can only think of my cousin saying, I live for dragons, and me being like, I'm going to go that way because I don't
Yeah.
want to ever
Yeah.
say those words. I don't know if you remember the story of a guy I went to high school with. I guess I'd call him a friend in high school, but he he used to buy swords on QVC. He was telling me how he was making all this money, and basically what he was doing is he was buying swords on QV or whatever, some channel that sold swords, and then he would just like double the price and sell them to like this one other friend of ours that didn't realize what he was doing.
Wow.
And this guy's dad owned a business, he had all this money, and so he like had this little racket where he would just get this other guy to buy swords that he'd bought at retail and then marked up. And you got to kind of, honestly, I kind of was impressed, but I also was like, I'm not want to be a sword guy because it
Yeah.
can only just like chasing the dragon. You're never going to get the high of that first sword, and you're going to keep buying swords from some guy who's charging you way too much. And where are you going to put all the swords?
Yeah. A little bit of an aside. You
Yeah,
know how like Amazon has made everything better, including apparently putting out the Wheel of Time.
yeah.
So for my daughter's softball team, we would always get something that was for like the player of the game. So it would be kind of
Mhm.
passed, the player of the
Yeah.
game in between games. And one year it was like a Thor hammer. Another year is a championship belt. And the year we ended up with the championship belt, I was actually looking at swords. And it's amazing. You can get like a legitimate sword for like $20 on Amazon.
Really?
Like
You
it's
can buy
not something.
swords on Amazon?
Yeah, but like cheap. Like you wouldn't want to
Wow.
go into battle with this sword. I don't think
Right.
it would stand up in a real battle, but I think it was also based on the warnings. You could get cut. Like it probably wouldn't be good to have, and we did end up not doing it for the girls softball team.
Yeah.
But maybe next year, there's always next year.
Well, I know they have signs around the field where it's like, this is a gun-free facility, no knives, guns. I don't know what the stance on swords is, but I think
We must
discretion is the better part of valor there, and
maybe, or we'll
you made
find
the
out
right
next
call.
spring.
Yeah, next spring you come
Yeah.
out and all the girls are sparring with swords. Sword of Damocles is one that I will admit I had not heard of the Sword of Damocles, up until maybe a couple years ago, and I think I just again, how you just sort of figure things out in context.
Yeah.
Kind of figured out what it meant or what I thought it meant, and then I've used it before, and basically just I've taken the Sword of Damocles hanging above your head to mean
Mhm.
some sort of impending bad thing that's going to happen, or almost for me, the way I have used it is like some inevitable bad thing that's going to happen, especially in the midst of like when times seem good or you've got some
Yeah.
good opportunity, but had no idea where it came from. So this has been fun for me to read into what it means, and we'll talk about it. What's your relationship with this one? Have you? I mean, did you recently hear of it? Did you grow up using Sword of Damocles?
It's something I wouldn't say I grew up using. I remember it from, I think it's a Greek myth. I don't know if it was translated into Roman myth too, but I remember it's kind of like a mythological story. I'm not sure if that's correct. But when you had told me what you're doing, the first thing I actually thought of was a song from the Rocky Horror Picture Show,
Ah,
which is we
yeah.
talked about doing things and wearing costumes. So my geek fandom is definitely Star Wars. And again, I don't dress up. I wouldn't say I'm a Rocky Horror Picture Show fan. I've never seen it in a movie theater. I've catch it for a while. It was on VH1. I really like the music in it. It's kind of it's a movie started based on a play, came out in the 70s. So it's got the music is a little bit like 50s nostalgia with 70s
Mhm.
glam rock. And the movie has Meatloaf in it, not the meal,
Oh,
the singer performer. And it's not what I'd call a great movie, but I enjoy the music of it. But there's a scene. It's a fast paced kind of catchy song called
mhm.
"The Sword of Damocles." It's in that movie. That's the first thing I thought of.
I somehow completely missed that movie. People love that movie. I think there's some reason I was a little just. It kind of freaked me out a little bit. I think part of it was that who's the guy's name? It's Timothy.
Tim Curry.
Tim Curry
Mhm.
was also the original clown in It,
Yeah.
and it is one that like somehow slipped past my parents, like
Oh yeah.
firewall, and I ended up seeing it, and it scared the crap out of me. And
Yeah.
so Tim Curry's face just scared the crap out of me, and then seeing him wearing whatever he was wearing and singing. I just said, I sort of like the sword and dragon thing. I said, I'm going to kind of go the other way with the, but I should watch it, I guess. Yeah.
Or maybe that movie came out before we were all as woke and hashtag pride as we are now.
Yeah.
And the basis is Tim Curry plays an alien from the planet Transylvania. And he's so introduces himself when he sings the song Sweet Transvestite.
Oh,
from transsexual Transylvania. And quoting here, which is one of those movies that, again, probably not in those unenlightened times, like the 1970s, probably not good family viewing. You know, what's interesting is I wonder now if that could be a movie that could be made. That if you remade it now, like if someone came up, this was my idea of this, that I'm going to have, you know, Dr. Frankenfurter. It was his character's name, and he literally makes a muscle man for himself. And I think that's actually what happens during the Sweet Transvestite song. Just something to ponder if, like, you went to a pitch meeting and tried to put this movie out now.
I don't think anything. I think they'd remake it and it would suck because they'd take out anything that could be offensive. Which reminds me, did you hear? I just heard this like today or yesterday that Amazon is no longer. We're talking about Amazon, and thank you, Amazon, for doing Wheel of Time. Thank you, Jeffrey Bezos,
and making a spaceship that looks like a penis.
Yes, thank you. Those are both good things. The bad thing is, though, that they're getting rid of like all their documentaries. Have you heard of this? Like, they're no longer accepting documentaries, and they're sort of slowly purging all their documentaries. And I was reading about it because I heard it and I said, that can't even be real. I heard it on a podcast. And then I read that it is real, and it has something to do with they're scared of, they just don't want the hassle of potential litigation of people being offended. So you know how like on YouTube, you can't say like right now, I think if I say the word, whatever, ivermectin or something, which we're demonetized now for that. Yeah. You can't say the word, you can't talk about anything, that they don't want documentaries that could be spinning up conspiracy theories. Because I mean, come on, some of the documentaries are pretty nutty, and they just have said no more documentaries. So with that sort of, that's where we are right now. I don't think you'd get away with, you certainly wouldn't be able to use the word transvestite.
I think they should hire whoever wrote the Finsta article on dictionary.com and just replace every documentary with a lecture and a finger wag at the end.
Hey, there's a reason why I watch old movies all the time now. Like, when I say old, I mean just stuff made before 10 years ago. So, okay, let's talk about Sword of Damocles real quick. We won't spend a ton of time here, but I want to explain what it means because it'll be satisfying to know when you use it. So just dictionary.com just says any situation threatening imminent harm or disaster, but that's really insufficient for what Sword of Damocles is. So here's the history. I went to 2 articles, one on history.com, one on thoughtco.com, and they both have articles about this topic and say pretty much the same thing. So who is Dan Mclees? He was a courtier during the reign of Dionysius the Younger, or the Second. And Dionysius, not to be confused with Dionysus, which is the sort of the god of wine and debauchery from Greek mythology. This is Dionysius. And by the way, Dionysius, it turns out, is like the Greek Bob or something. Like, there are tons, like Dionysius, there's a ton of Dionysius, people with the name Dionysius. But this is this tyrant from Sicily. And so he was made king before he was 30 years old. His dad, Dionysius the First or whatever, died. And this guy was, by all accounts, kind of a piece of shit. And as you can imagine, you're like the son of a king in BC times. And, you know, you become essentially a dictator at the age of whatever he was, 26 or something. And first of all, nobody liked him. Everybody hated him. But and by the way, this is coming from Cicero. Cicero wrote in his 45 BC book, Tusculan Disputations. He talked about the Sword of Damocles and Dionysius. So here's how the story goes. Nobody liked Dionysius, but there's this guy, Damocles, and Damocles is really just like a professional kiss ass. He lays around the king's quarters and says, "Oh, you're so magnificent." So whatever. You're the best Dionysius of all of them. And so eventually Dionysius says, you know what? How about this? How about we switch places? You come sit on the throne and you can experience what it's like to be me, because, you think it's so great. And of course, Damocles is like, yeah, sounds great to me. So he gets on the throne.
Mhm.
And this is a parable, by the way,
Mm.
right? When we get this from Cicero, this is not like this may or may not have actually happened. It probably didn't.
Right.
It's just a parable. And so this guy Damocles sits on the throne and he's, getting grapes fed to him and all this stuff. And he's like, that's good to be king. Well, Dionysius has a sword that he has hung over top of the throne, and it's being held by one strand of horsehair. And the point of this, per Cicero and per the parable, because at that point, Damocles is like, nah, forget this. I'm finna jump out of the, shouldn't have even done it in jest. I'm going to get out of this throne, and I don't want to be underneath this sword. So for Cicero, this parable represented the idea that those in power always labor under the specter of anxiety and death, and that there can be no happiness for one who is under constant apprehensions. This parable later becomes repeated, and it's a common motif in medieval literature. And the phrase "Sword of Damocles" is now commonly a catch-all for just looming danger. And I think it's a good one in that sense, because it kind of makes, like, we don't really think of like kings and the danger that they're under to be like assassinated or whatever, kind of in the way that it was back then. Because back then, like you said, I mean, the kings and all these people were dead. They were getting assassinated. By the way, the story of Dionysius II is actually, like, I don't have time to go into it. It's really interesting. He ends up getting chased out. Plato comes in to try to help him out. I mean, he was a real person, and there was crazy life. And of course, he ended up dying alone and miserable, like, at 35 or something.
I wonder if he ever ran across Diogenes.
Could be.
From Cynicism. That would be a fun.
Yeah, those two. Gosh, those two would be a team. But I was thinking about, like, what's the sort of corollary for today, and I think it would be maybe like celebrities or people that would say, "Hey, you want to be me, but like you don't really want to be me," And I used to kind of be like, "Oh, whatever, quit crying." But they're actually, I'm like, no, I don't want to be. I mean, we're famous enough as it is, and I can't. But I wouldn't want to be famous. So it's the parable, I think, is getting to that. There are some other interpretations of this. The first one is, like I said, that death just looms over us all, and it's important to strive to be happy and enjoy life in spite of that terror. Another interpretation that's come out of the parable of the Sword of Damocles is, don't judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. So it looks like Dionysius's life is perfect from the outside, but really he just lives in fear. And so here's an actual sword showing you how it feels like for me all the time. And then the last sort of interpretation you see is that the Sword of Damocles story was specifically meant for Julius Caesar. When Cicero was telling this, he was making a point for Julius Caesar, which, by the way, listen, I'm no historian, but thank you, Cicero, for writing so much stuff down. And he was a great Roman orator. And I mean, who knows? He could have been a horrible human being, but at least seems like he was trying to hold things together as Rome was sort of falling apart. And he did a great job of documenting things. So I'm always very happy for people like Pliny the Elder and Cicero and who's the Greek one that wrote everything down? I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but
Medea.
Medea. So just to conclude, NPR's Melissa Block did an interview with Daniel Mendelsohn, who's a classics scholar, and he talked about how people aren't using Sword of Damocles right. Like, if you're just using it to say there's some impending doom, that's fine. I mean, that's even what dictionary.com says, but it's really missing the original lesson of the story. He says that the real point of the story is very clearly a moral parable. It's not just something terrible is about to happen, but it's also about realizing what looks like an enviable life, a life of wealth, a life of power, a life of luxury is in fact fraught with anxiety, terror, and possible death. Which is the moral of the story.
And I think it's fitting. I mean, we're two guys that have a nice life. We enjoy our podcast, but we have to worry about if we're going to be hunted down because we each use the term ivermectin and transvestite on the same episode.
Yeah.
So we might end up in Jeff Bezos' penis spaceship. By the way, it was not modeled off Jeff Forbes. That ship was way too small.
You know, I think that's a great note to go out on. So, Steve, you want to wrap this up and bring us home?
Gladly. Thank you very much for listening to Origin of Speakcies. If you enjoyed the show, please help us spread the word by liking and subscribing on YouTube and/or leaving a positive review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. For more great content and to directly support our show, especially now since we'll definitely be demonetized from YouTube, become a Speakcies supporter at patreon.com/Speakcies. Any amount of support provides you access to great bonus content, including access to other Speakcies shows like our exclusive video podcast, 3 Silly Questions, where Scott and I ask our special guest a certain set of questions. And very soon we'll be adding a new video to that with another world record holder. I believe this is the second world record holder
You're
we've
right.
interviewed. For all this and more, including where to buy ivermectin, go to patreon.com/Speakcies. That's patreon.com/Speakcies.
Bob's your uncle?
Watch out for bears, and kale is from the devil.
We had a cat called Dionysus. Every day another crisis.
Speakcies.